Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the NOFO, the Notice of Funding Opportunity Announcement Applicant Information Briefing here at the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences for the Hazardous Materials Worker Health and Safety Training, U45, Clinical Trials Not Allowed briefing. We welcome you to this event where we will share information about the logistics of this NOFO, the key components, programs, and also kind of give you some insights on how to prepare and get the best application in order for to respond to this NOFO. My name is Sharon Beard. I'm the director for the Worker Training Program here in the Division of Extramural Research and Training here at NIEHS. I'd like to also introduce the staff that are here with us from Worker Training, Grants Management, and the Scientific Review, and then other folks within DERT that's been providing us support in this effort. So we will have from Worker Training, Kathy Allmark and Dr. Eric Prasad, who are our health specialists for Worker Training. Then we also have Amia Pearson, who is a new staff member, who is an industrial hygienist here for the Worker Training Program. And Gary Johnson is our other industrial hygienist. He's not here today, but that rounds out the staff at Worker Training. Then we also have James Williams. He's the lead grants management officer working for us here in Worker Training here at NIEHS. So James is here. And we also have here in attendance, we have Michelle Campbell, who is a inclusion health specialist in our population health branch, who really has kind of her eye on all of our human subjects and activities. And then we may also have Jackie Marquez, who's also another health specialist around some of these health, and human subjects issues and concerns. And we will be hearing from Dr. Leroy Worth later on today, who is from our Scientific Review Office here at NIEHS. So that includes all of the folks here that's here from NIEHS. But I also wanted to welcome all of you here in the audience. I think we had around 85 people who've signed up. I think we've had around 50. So hopefully we'll have other folks coming in, but we appreciate you coming here so that we can share a little bit more about our programs and activities here in the Worker Training Program. So I'm going to go over the agenda. Not much with site logistics since most people are actually virtually, but we'll go over some of those activities and then we'll go into some question and answers. So one of the things we want to make sure that you have, if you need to know more information about who we are and the Worker Training Program, you have the website there. And if you need to have information about the current NOFO and any of the other current funding opportunities, here is the website link here. If you want to send questions, you have two opportunities to do that. You can send them to the WETP@niehs.nih.gov email, and we will be monitoring that through the entire meeting. You can also put them in the Q&A portion of the webinar that we have. So those are the two options for you to submit questions. And if we're going through the Q&A portion, if you want to raise your hand, I think we might be able to do it that way, but we would prefer if you could type your questions so that we can actually get a good accounting of the questions, because we will be putting up Q&As after the session. So we really appreciate that. So here's the agenda for today. We're going to be moving forward with me doing the introduction, and then we'll go over into the program components and guidelines for this particular NOFO. I'll be going over the hazardous general overview and the hazardous waste. Eric will be dealing with our ECWT and a hazmat disaster. Kathy will also be handling all of the overall components and how you need to pull together your program, some attachments and appendices. And then we will break and have Q&A on the program portion of everything. Then Kathy will come back and give you some tips and for preparation for a successful application. And then we'll let you know about the link, which is important. If you have not applied for an NIH grant, you really do need to learn how to use the ASSIST system. We think that's the best system for you to use. I know some of you might want to go and use the Gov the gov.com, excuse me, I can't even remember what it is. It's the grants.gov page for you to submit an application. But this really is the best way for you to be able to share, to upload your application. Then we'll go into the part of the fiscal and administrative issues with James Williams. Then Dr. Leroy Worth will be going over the scientific review, and then we'll have one last Q&A portion for all of us there. So if we have any additional questions, and we'll try to adjourn around 4:30. So I'm now going to get started into the presentation. First and foremost, the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, our mission is to discover how the environment affects people in order to promote healthier lives. And we do that by focusing on a vision to provide global leadership for innovative research that improves public health and by preventing disease and disability. The worker training program is really that outreach arm. We do some of this prevention work on a daily basis with the training that we're doing. And so we feel like we are on that outreach group to make sure that we translate all of the information and the research that occurs in our extramural program and our intramural program, and make sure that we're able to translate it to the workers and individuals that we engage in under this program. The strategic plan for the NIEHS has some key themes that we currently have. This is in effect for 2018 to 2023. We're in the process of developing a new strategic plan that hopefully will be out by the end of this calendar year. The themes probably will not change that much, so they'll be probably advancing environmental health sciences, promoting translation, data to knowledge and action, and enhancing EHS through stewardship and support. But we will certainly share that information with you about when the new strategic plan comes out. So now I'll go over the overview of the program. As you know, the mission of the worker training program is to prevent work-related harm by providing training programs for hazardous materials handlers, chemical emergency responders, and waste cleanup. One of the ways that we accomplish this mission is that we focus on developing programs to address the key areas that we focus on each year. One focusing on the worker safety and health training. That's our regular hazardous waste, delivering training to workers, work sites, and safer communities through our hazmat disaster program, responding to disasters and emergencies such as wildfires, hurricanes, and other types of outbreaks and infectious diseases. Then we have our workforce development program, which is our environmental career worker training program, and empowering individuals in disadvantaged communities with new skills and options for careers in construction and environmental work. And we also have another program, which is our SBIR, which really helps to promote the actual work that we're doing by developing innovative technologies to use the worker health and safety training program. We also have a Department of Energy program that we were hoping we were going to be able to do that today, but the NOFO is still not out yet. We hope it's going to come out any day, and then we'll have a separate briefing for that notice of funding opportunity announcement. So the mission here has, like I said, been the same. And we actually fund right now 17 grantees in consortium through cooperative agreements representing over 100 nonprofit safety and health organizations. And we have 4 of our small business grantees that we also have. But one of the unique things about how we do our work is that because of the consortium approach to training, we have been providing training in all 50 states, Washington, D.C., and all of the U.S. territories because of the reach of all of our grantees and their consortium partners. We fund these nonprofit organizations with a demonstrated track record of providing high-quality occupational safety and health training to workers involved in handling hazardous materials or responding to emergency releases or hazardous materials. And it's through the grantees and the work that they do every day in developing training and programs that we're able to reach so many people under this program. So here's some metrics to date in reference to the training that we've done under this program since 1986. We've offered over 280,000 plus courses. We've trained around 5 million workers. That means 60 million contact hours of training. And each year that kind of averages in around 180 to 200,000 workers that we train under this program. And it is a testament to the way we have built this program in reference to consortiums that we're able to reach so many workers and volunteers and individuals who need to have this specific training to make them safe on the job. So let's start from the basics here in reference to our program. Our program was established because of the Hazardous Waste Operations and Emergency Response Standard, our HAZWOPER standard, 1910-120. And Sarah, which is the Superfund Reauthorization and Amendment Act, mandated that the Occupational Safety and Health Administration develop a standard to protect workers involved in hazardous waste operations and emergency response. And since that time, NIEHS has been given the kind of the lead of developing the training and enforcement in reference, not enforcement, training in this area. And we've been doing this ever since this rule was established. And HAZWOPER has become the basis for the training developed under the Worker Training Program. We also have looked at other areas, including the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act of 1976, which regulates treatment, storage, and disposal of hazardous waste. And this is one of the areas that we think is so important because of the fact that many of our workers are involved in RCRA facilities, and training that's appropriate for RCRA is covered under our HAZWOPER standards. So that is one of the areas that we focus on. When we get to hazardous waste operations and emergency response, there are three major sections that really appear focused for our program. And they're broad areas of training under the regulation. One, Section E, dealing with training of general site workers engaged in operations conducted at hazardous waste site that may or may not be exposed to hazardous materials. Q, which focuses on the training of workers engaged in certain hazardous waste operations conducted under RCRA and treatment, storage, and disposal facilities. And Q, training of workers engaged in emergency response operations for release and substantial threat to release a hazardous substance and those hazards. And so the training that we develop, it really focuses on these three areas. And then I'll go into a little bit more about our minimum criteria, or Eric will, because that was the Appendix E to the HAZWOPER standard that the NIEHS developed, which is the guiding principles of how we actually develop our training program here at in the Worker Training Program. So what have we done over the years? We've been doing training to restore communities after disasters and other incidents. As you can see, we've done training in everything from natural to man-made disasters and infectious disease. We've just come out of probably one of the greatest pandemics that has faced us here in the world, dealing with COVID, and we've been able to incorporate lessons learned on how to don and doff personal protective equipment to deal with infectious diseases. We've developed training on emergency response, wildfire, flood preparedness, and here's an example of some of the work that we've done with volunteer firefighters and EMT students in rural Whatcom County in Washington. This is a training that's been developed under our RUT consortium. Other trainings that we've been involved in dealing with firefighters and other folks in rural areas in Kentucky through OAI, responding to different types of training that's needed there. And then, of course, I mentioned COVID-19 and other climate-related disasters where we've worked with clinicians and we've conducted bilingual webinars addressing worker vulnerability through our Atlantic Center, Rutgers, and Migrant Clinicians Network. So our training is vast and it provides a lot of different avenues to get this information to target populations who need our training. And so in closing, WTP plays an important role in responding to disasters and emerging threats. And so we really want to make sure that the applicants who come in under this program can deliver quality health and safety training on disaster-related activities under our programs. So once again, here are all of the program areas that we have here under our program, and we all work together to make sure that we're able to develop these tools and activities. But what we're going to focus on today is our U45 group, which is these three programs: our Hazardous Waste Worker Training Program, our Hazmat Disaster Preparedness Training, and our Environmental Career Worker Training Program. And we do this through cooperative agreements. And so cooperative agreements is distinctly different from a grant. in that it provides for substantial involvement between the federal agency, which is NIEHS, and the grant award recipient, which is you when you apply for this. And so if you get funded, we will have responsibilities for PIs and program staff, that you'll be responsible for doing things, and then we'll have responsibilities for NIH staff and how we engage and do this. And it really is about a partnership so that we're able to provide this quality training, because we work in various different groups and stages because of our disaster response activities. So we really do need to work in collaboration to be able to develop the training. So if it's a disaster response activity, if you're needing to do something that's specific to the particular hazards, then we work with our grantees to develop site-specific training. And so we want to be able to move forward. So the key areas of focus here is that you have to apply for the Hazardous Waste Worker Training Program. That is the core component. So it is required. And then we have optional training programs. If you want to be a part of the U45 cooperative agreement, you can apply for the Hazmat Disaster Preparedness or the Environmental Career Worker Training Program if you have expertise and experience in doing these types of trainings. So here are our current grantees under our program. And so these are all the ones that are U45s. We have one that we have here for our UH4 grant, but we wanted to make sure that you had an idea of these are some of the groups that we provide training with under this program. Funding for this program, as you can see, for FY23 was around 18.9 for our hazardous waste, about 4.1 for our environmental career, and 3.5 for our hazmat disaster program. And so we're hoping to be able to provide this money, but everything is based on appropriations. And who knows, we did receive a cut in FY24 of 4%, but we're hoping in FY25 we'll get our full allotment of funding, so we'll be able to provide all those resources to be able to move forward on here. So I wanted to cover just a little bit more in reference to cooperative agreements. One of the things that cooperative agreements give us an opportunity to do is that we have to build this national coordination to avoid duplication and overlap. If we're doing a response activity, or we're doing an environmental career worker training program, and there are other job training programs in the general area, whether they're brownfields or other types of Job Corps, we work with our grantees to make sure that we're not targeting the same target population so we can avoid duplication. We facilitate ongoing exchange of scientific and technical information that is specific to the different types of hazards that we engage in under this program. We actually ensure regulatory compliance with applicable federal worker health and safety requirements. As you know, there was a temporary standard for dealing with COVID, and we helped our grantees who received COVID supplemental funds to be able to utilize that material and the information to develop training specific to that. Just like right now going on with the national heat emphasis going on with OSHA and the proposed standards on dealing with heat, we're going to be looking at how do we utilize the training programs and materials here to have national consistency and delivery of training. And so we're working on having our grantees develop and use existing curriculum to meet the needs. And it also allows for timely and appropriate response to events of national significance. And so I think this is something that's important for us to be able to do across our programs. One, we have limited training funds, so we want to make sure that we coordinate efforts so that we're able to move forward and do this work in a collaborative way. One of the things that's important, that there are key training strategic elements for each program component. Here are these activities. Kathy will share more later in the presentation regarding these key elements, but I wanted to make sure that everybody does this. So if you have had prior grants, you have to put progress and what you've done in accomplishing those in your program. You have to share your background and experience. You have to show compliance with the minimum criteria, and then a couple of other things that you have to focus on doing under this solicitation, and this is for all program components. So current priorities. As you know, each 5 years we develop this NOFO and we put in new areas of emphasis. And so the things that we're really focusing on is we're pushing our system of an all hazards approach, which means training to cover existing and emerging threats, including training on known, emerging, unknown, everyday, and or disaster specific hazards. We're going to continue to focus on infectious disease. Over the years, like we said, we've responded to everything from bloodborne pathogens to Ebola to COVID-19. And as we know, we're still having issues with H1N1. We're having new viruses and new threats come up that can impact workers and individuals on the job. So that still is a major priority for us. Also, we've been doing a lot of work dealing with making sure that we're training workers who are exposed to the impact of opioids, whether they're emergency responders or if they're workers who get injured on the job and have to deal with worker substance issues and opioids. Another area is climate change, equity, and justice. And that's another area that we really focus on because we know that a lot of the disasters that are occurring right now are because of climate change. And so we're trying to make sure that we address those and do it through an environmental justice and equity lens. Our Justice 40 initiative, in particular, our environmental career worker training program is something that we have been doing for the last 4 or 5 years. And we were just awarded as far as the pilot for Justice 40 under our environmental career. And Eric is going to talk a little bit more about that. We will continue to move forward to focus on disadvantaged and other tribal and other hardly reached communities because we know that that's one of the things that's going to be important for us to be able to move forward. For example, if we have workers who have limited English proficiency, we want to make sure that we're utilizing our focus on language justice to make sure that we're providing training in their language or bilingual training. We want to make sure that we are encourage our grantees to use adaptable and innovative methods to respond to future training needs. So that means the incorporation of maybe e-learning and other type of technologies in your training. And we also want to continue our focus on evaluation across all of our programs and to look at expanding our partnerships with federal, state, and local groups to be able to get access to target populations and then make sure that our training is consistent with the needs of municipalities. So one of the things that I think is important is that all of our programs must include or meet the following criteria. Consortium arrangements and training partnerships are strongly encouraged. An applicant may join with one or more nonprofit organizations in a single application and share resources in order to maximize worker group coverage, to enhance effectiveness of training and bring together appropriate academic disciplines and talents. And so these types of arrangements are absolutely strongly encouraged under our training program. Another area is the application must have specific plans to implement cooperative arrangements where we're actually looking at detailed training to work to do direct student and worker training, and it's critical under this program, and you have to really do that. We were not a type of program where we're spending all of our activities and resources in developing curricula. You can develop curricula, but you have to be able to show immediately that you're able to do direct student and worker training under this programs. And one of the other areas is that you must target and have multi-state and or nationwide coverage to reach wider worker training programs, and that will be given a preference in this program. For example, if we have to have multi-state engagement. That's a requirement for this program. So you can't just say we're just going to address workers in California. We want you to be multi-state. We want you to be able to either have regional coverage to cover municipalities and other jurisdictions covering not fewer than 2 states. And we encourage you to do that through this consortium model that we've had over the years under this training program. We want you to target and, like I said, engage hardly reached disadvantaged workers, limited English proficiency, and disaster volunteers with a particular focus on occupational health disparities and address environmental justice issues. We just had a workshop on closing the gap, design and training to address occupational health disparities. And so we'll be having more information about that workshop and the tools and activities that came out of that. In closing, here are some of the other things that each one of the program components must have. We encourage peer learning and hands-on activities and critical thinking skills. We want folks to incorporate training evaluation to measure student learning and assess training impact. You have to adhere to the NIEHS minimum criteria for health and safety training. And we really want you to have a balanced approach and include priority training areas as listed under program initiatives. So I mentioned some of the technical workshops. Over the years, we've had at least 2 technical workshops each year. And so we have all the reports that have been developed, lessons learned, key target training, tools and resources that we've developed at these recent workshops and webinars, and they're available. Here's a couple as an example of some of the work that we've done in recently. One on examining the changing landscape of HAZWAPA training. We also have once every 5 years, our National Trainers Exchange, where we have over 300 of our grantees come together and their trainers come, and we share and exchange best practices in training, technology, and emerging issues to promote exchange across all of our programs. We've done webinars on urban flooding, and we've also done some work on dealing with safety and health training for Native Americans and Alaskan Natives, and in partnership with our PPH program here at NIEHS. And we've also worked with other different groups like the American Industrial Hygiene Association, Commit to Care, on looking at awareness of infectious disease programs. So these are just a couple of the activities that we've had. One of the things that's also important is that we can't do this work unless we have partnerships. Partnerships, not just for disasters and response, but partnerships so that we can really be able to have critical for the success of our work. So federal, state, and local agencies, worker centers, tribes and indigenous groups, community and faith-based organizations, unions, and volunteer groups, and are just some of the key groups that we've been able to partner with to make sure that we make sure training gets to the people that really need to have it. And I think one of the things that we've been able to do under our program, because we're a part of so many different response frameworks, for example, the worker training program are part of the National Response Framework, the National Disaster Recovery Framework, and the National Contingency Plan. And upon activation of any of these plans, the worker training program can be activated to do a couple of different things, such as training and technical assistance on instructional staff, curricular development, bringing in subject matter experts and professional staff to be able to do what is necessary to support that disaster response. We might assist in supporting the development of site-specific health and safety training that's needed in that particular response. We might develop assistance with respiratory fit testing and distribution of personal protective equipment across that. And we do that through this partnership and working with different federal agencies. So here are some of the agencies that we work with. Those include everybody from the Department of Energy, HHS, dealing with the Administration and Strategic Preparedness and Response, ASPR, OSHA, Centers for Disease Control, just a couple of some of the groups that we work with when we're actually doing our response and activities. So one of the other areas that we have in the NOFO is our ongoing program initiatives that we may be included into applicant programs. And here are a couple of examples of some of those. We've already talked about some of them dealing with biopreparedness and infectious disease, looking at different types of areas. But because the landscape of hazardous materials, hazardous waste, and emergency response has grown over the years, we've kind of left it open for each of our grantees based on the group that they work with. So if you're working with Teamsters, and we need to have more training that deals with heat stress, or dealing with hazmat materials and transportation, that you will develop training based on these particular areas and incorporate it into what you're doing. So for example, we have reference to all of the different executive orders dealing with chemical facility safety and security, dealing with responder and community resilience, preparedness, and other emerging issues, artificial intelligence, green technologies, and safety training to support these areas. As we know, the landscape is large, so we know that we're having to understand some of the newer technologies that are out here. So if we have electric vehicles and we're having training to support the hazards in those sites, we've got to be able to do that. And then we've always had a program dealing with opioids and substance use under the program. So other key considerations that I think is certainly important that you have to have and to be responsive under this program is strong and detailed consortia alignment. So if we have a focus and you're dealing with the Midwest area or you're dealing with the regional area, we want to make sure that you have detailed how your consortium works together. Competent program management and dealing with principal investigators, program managers, and coordinators is absolutely essential for the work that we're doing here. We also want you to make sure that you have adequate training facilities, and quality control and evaluation is certainly important. And over the next 5 years, we want you to look at some what we consider some program successes and worker engagement, looking at adult learning principles, other things like the creation of national safety and health training benchmarks and guidance, and then also looking at just integration of all the different types of new standards and efforts that are out here. This is important that we look at. I want to close in general that we have actually been in development of our new strategic plan for the program, and it is posted. And here are the sections that we have here, but part of that is we also have a logic model and an operational matrix that we have every year that guides how we move and do our work. Here are some of the key components of the strategic plan. And one of the things that I want to focus your efforts on is that we have key objectives in the different themes like worker health and safety training, adaptability and innovation, and outreach and communication. So that concludes the overall aspects of the program. So now I'm going to move into the hazardous waste worker training program, which is the core program. This program provides a health and safety training for workers engaged in activities around hazardous waste removal, containment, and emergency response. As I said, this is core. Everybody who applies for this grant has to do that. Over the years since we've done this program, we've had over 40 million worker training contact hours. We've trained over 3.8 million workers under this program. And in 2023, we had around 129,000 workers that we trained, and we have 17 grantees. Here are a couple of spotlights of the training that we've done. One is with the Center for Construction Research and Training, CPWR. They worked with training for sheet metal workers at a facility, local 58 in Syracuse. One of the things that we're seeing is that a lot of our training programs and a lot of industries are adapting their processes there. And so this particular one was installing a new tooling and replacing existing ducts where hydrofluoric acid had been formed crystals and inner surfaces. So they really worked on developing training to deal with this global foundries, to expand their manufacturing facilities and clean up. And so these are the types of work that we see happening under the regular program. So it's industrial emergency response activities, dealing with a regular OSHA training, OSHA 10, OSHA 30. These are the types of trainings that we want to focus on doing and supporting municipalities and employers. So of course, we want to continue looking at infectious disease. We do not have a separate program for that, so it should be incorporated into the training, and hazardous waste is one of the ones that we want to have it in there. We've had initiatives with our COVID recovery centers and also our regular COVID training, and then also lessons learned from Ebola and other infectious diseases that we've done within the past. So that covers the general overview and our hazardous waste worker training program. Now I'm going to turn it over to Eric Prasad so he can share information on our environmental career worker training program and our hazmat disaster. Eric?
Hey, good day, everybody. How are you all doing? Yeah, so as Sharon said, I'm going to talk about the environmental career worker training program and the hazmat disaster preparedness training program. These are the two optional components of a U45 grant. So next slide, please. If we could advance a slide. Oh, there we go. Thank you. So the environmental career worker training program focuses on providing life skills as well as basic technical education to trainees so that they are able to get these pre-employment skills and the ability to learn on the job and off the job so that they can get careers, and that the grantees of these programs tend to have large networks and partnerships within their communities that they leverage after of all their years of trust within their community to get these to get these trainees employed, and it maintains a very high employment rate because of that. This program got its start back in 1994, once upon a time called the Minority Worker Training Program. It's since been renamed to the Environmental Career Worker Training Program. And over the years, reports have been published to look at how it's achieved successes and best practices, and look at how the program has achieved return on investments economically and societally. The program has been celebrating now in its 28th year of success, and in 2022 was selected as a Justice 40 pilot initiative. I'll talk about that a little bit in a moment. So next slide, please.
Eric, I think you don't have your camera on. If you want to cut that on, this is an opportunity.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, so like I was saying, the program has been around since 1994, 1995, and has trained over 14,000 people. The program takes folks that come from these disadvantaged communities and disadvantaged by environmental contamination and a lack of training, and provides levels of support. Now, maybe we may take for granted sometimes the level of support that we have in our daily lives, that social support, that emotional support, that financial support, and many of these trainees don't have that in their lives. And this program provides that exceptional mentorship and counseling, the social services, as well as the technical education and skills necessary to get them to work safely on the job and find careers. And it has maintained an over 70% job placement rate overall, which we take tremendous pride in. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier, this program focuses not just on technical education, which is important, but the embedment of understanding life skills, these pre-employment understanding of how to do the job and how to do it safely, and recognize dangerous work environments, and also empower workers so that they can feel confident to go back and take actions that are meaningful in their workplace to be safe. The program was selected in 2022 as a Justice 40 pilot initiative, which means that it intends to achieve 40% of overall federal investments, for example, in workforce development and training, to go to these disadvantaged communities, once again, disadvantaged by environmental contamination and lack of training. And it is found that there's been over 28 times return on investment for every federal annual investment. It was recently highlighted by Admiral Rachel Levine, who is the Assistant Secretary for Health at HHS, who went down to MyPower, one of the OAI partners, to discuss that Justice 40 initiative. And because of the additional funding from the Justice 40 initiative, was able to start work in St. Louis and reach more lives and save more workers. Next slide, please. And what we try to see from these job training skills, from the technical education, for example, construction, community health workers, remediation, emergency response, energy jobs, and embody them with these life skills to better communicate, handle finances, which a lot of our folks aren't as comfortable with, computer literacy, reading literacy, basic math and skills and other life skill components, and equipping them with the understanding of their rights, understanding of environmental justice, better understanding their own mental health, and once again, that occupational health and safety component, so that they can individually have an internal growth, but also make their workplaces safer, their communities more sustainable, and have impacts in the policies of their workplace and communities. Next, please. And as I mentioned, we have conducted evaluations throughout the period of the program. One was recently conducted. It's intended to be published shortly. We do have a fact sheet of it. And for every $3.5 million of federal annual investment, from the years 2014 to 2022, we found that there was a 28 times return on investment for nearly $100 million every year. That $890 million of cumulative value can be attributed to effect on earnings. So 840 million on effect on earnings. Quite simply, trainees from this program made more than people did not graduate from this training program. And they did so by having greater working hours and greater wages, because the hirers of that trainee was able to have a greater level of trust, knowing that they came from a pool of workers that were better prepared to do the work and more likely to get promotions and things like that, because they have been better trained and ready to do that occupation and come in trusted by the employer because of the trust that the grantee has in that community. We've also found that a $7 million safety and related cost savings, because there's an occupational health and safety component of this program oftentimes. And that safety aspect, one, the reduction of costs in health and safety training, but the likelihood that trainees will have less significant injury and those costs that are related to significant injury. There are also cost hiring savings, because employers do not have to spend large sums of money to hire workers. They have this pool that they trust and can go to. And a reduction in crime costs. Many of our trainees in this program may come from being formerly incarcerated and returning citizens. And the reduction in that crime and recidivism, as well as the victimization costs, help to achieve economic return on investment. Next slide, please. And
Excuse me, Eric, before you move forward, if you have a problem with your audio, please send an email message. Send a message to our staff here who's doing AV. We don't see a problem, we don't hear a problem, but we need to make sure that you're able to hear what's going on the webinar.
Yeah, thank you for addressing that. I didn't see it. As I was saying, this program is by no means a bean counter program. We do not say we train people to check it off a list that we train people. It is all about those outcomes in the community and those long-term improvements to the community and growth. And for example, one of our grantees, the Western Regions University Consortium, partners with Zender Environmental, and they provide training to Alaskan natives, people from rural Alaskan villages. And while these classes may be smaller than other classes, these people go back to their communities, to these rural villages, and oftentimes become the only voice in environmental justice in that community, in identifying environmental injustices and how to produce strategies to counteract the health effects of environmental contamination. Next slide. And we ask for, any success stories of our trainees, to know about how the trainees' lives are going and give back information on that to us. And we get tons and tons of incredible success stories every year. For example, there's Mr. Abels, who had a reading disorder and really no technical education. And through this program and the supportive services of the program, was able to find a job, a meaningful job in commercial driving. And then there's Miss Graves, who is a single mother who became a licensed mold remediation contractor following Hurricane Ida. And she started her own company, and in partnership with another environmental career grantee, she has been leading in the recruitment, the mentorship, and ultimately the employment of women in mold remediation services. Next slide. And now I want to talk briefly about the Hazmat Disaster Preparedness Training Program. This is a program that supports the development and delivery of training for hazardous material and debris cleanup commonly needed after natural and man-made disasters. It kind of got its start following in 2005 after years of responses to numerous large-scale disasters, including the September 11 terrorist attacks, where our program was on the pile, and of course, Hurricane Katrina and disasters going on since then. It has trained over 277,000 workers. We currently have 14 grantees with this funding stream. Next slide, please. And as Sharon mentioned earlier, we take an all hazard approach to training so that we can cover all kinds of working conditions and environments that workers may face and not be overly prescriptive, understanding that disasters evolve and change and may overlap. And we want to make sure that our training, our resources ensure the safety of workers and their communities for all kinds of known and unknown situations. Next slide, please. And there are multiple hazards that can go on during a disaster, man-made disaster, public health emergencies, and we are a participating agency in the National Response Framework, the National Disaster Recovery Framework, and a National Contingency Plan. So we coordinate on large network of grantees to respond to large-scale events. We've had grantees deliver health and safety training on tornadoes, flooding, hurricane cleanup safety, wildfire-related hazards to prevent infectious diseases. And it's been going on for a long time, decades. And once again, targets the employers, the businesses, the workers themselves, and ensuring that we provide a high-quality professional training environment. Next slide. And the WTP has created an emergency support activation plan. This is a document to provide WTP awardees who participate in disaster response activities, guidance and recommendations to better prepare their personnel and families prior to, during, and after disaster response deployment, using this cooperative agreement and really relying on local capacity of the areas that you reach. So building that network of contacts within the disaster area with contractors, cities, state, local government, community organizations, and such, and making sure that you're working with those who are familiar with the unique cultures and languages of that impacted area. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned earlier, we've had grantees respond to all kinds of disasters and situations. For example, Deep South Center partners with faith-based and other organizations when they respond to the impacts of Hurricane Irma in Louisiana. The Western Region Universities Consortium and the Teamsters worked with emergency responders, community-based organizations, and day laborers to respond to wildfires in California. And OAI has trained first responders and built a capacity locally to respond to tornadoes and flooding in Kentucky. And these are just a few examples of many in the Hazmat Disaster Response Program. Next slide, please. And in 2023, WTP received $2.5 million in disaster supplements from the Consolidated Appropriations Act. One example of multiple supplements that have been awarded throughout this program's history in response to major events and emerging topics. And we held a kickoff meeting with the WTP grantees and local partners in Puerto Rico, one of those areas that are covered under the Appropriations Act, and have been using funding to deliver training to populations impacted by these recent disasters, those declared in 2022 across the United States, territories, and Washington, D.C., and partners with local government, academia, unions, community-based organizations in that effort to do so. Next slide, please. And a major component of the program overall, not just the Hazmat Disaster Program, but the U45, is the importance of evaluation. And we have a minimum criteria from 2018, and that provides, it's a guidance document that sets standards for grantees, including on evaluation and training. And we urge you to take a moment to look at that so that you can plan to address the measurements and evaluation of student learning, progress and performance, the methods and procedure for that evaluation, and the process of assessing the instructor effectiveness, how trainees retain knowledge and use hand-on skills, and any outcomes from the training. Next slide, please. Oh, I think it's Kathy's turn. Sergeant walked up to the mic, so.
Yes, so it's going to be my turn now. I'm going to be briefly going over the overall components, attachments, appendices, etc. So for this slide, I just want to point out, basically, this is an overview of what we'll be discussing today. The current WTP funding opportunities is linked there. The slides will be going into that. The recording will be going at that spot. Any Q&As or FAQs we have will be there. So basically, for your research and related other project information, the program summary and abstract, you need to state the problem and how the consortium will address target problems related to hazard waste training. And for your project narrative, the public health relevance of the training and the ability of your center to conduct the training. For the research plan, please follow the directions as they are in the NOFO. The biggest issue is you must provide an overview of the consortium, especially institutional capacity, to conduct the training and provide an overview of the entire application and explain how the components work together. This is a place to show how the consortium will be managed to complete the targeted training. In this area, you should include the following as listed in the NOFO. As opposed to a generic description of the center components, these specific aims should provide an overall indication of the center purposes. For example, the applicant should state the applicant's broad, long-term objectives and specific aims for worker health and safety training, and it is essential that it capture the character of the proposed training program. It should describe the proposed hazardous waste material and waste worker populations targeted for the training, including size, types of work, and geographic locations. It should project the number of workers anticipated to be trained. Other attachments must be included. You must label these carefully with a title and within the attachment, especially for the components. Our Funding Opportunities website has example illustrations of this, and there are table formats as guides that you'll be seeing later in my presentation, and letters of support are allowed. Limited appendix materials are allowed. You'll need to refer to the NIH notice that is linked here. This NOFO does not request additional allowable appendix materials, and no other items are allowed in the appendix. Simply relocating disallowed materials to other parts of the application will result in a non-compliant application, unless they are items specified in the NOFO as optional or required for those other sections in the application. The following other attachments must be included with your overall component. For the training center organizational structure, applicants must include a diagram of the organizational structure of the training center. This diagram should demonstrate how the interactions between the different aspects of the center achieve the mandate-driven goals of the center and how each consortia member or organization is integrated into the program structure. The diagram must be uploaded as a PDF file entitled Training Center Organizational Structure. For curricula, applicants must describe key curricular courses in the outline form. The description of each curriculum must not exceed 2 pages in length and must include the following: the course title, a short description of course, training provider, languages, delivery method, course hours, intended audience, learning objectives, and the course outline. Do not include copies of the actual curricula. The diagram must be provided as a PDF file titled Description of Curricula. The tables for the year one training plan to facilitate in understanding the detailed training plans in the first year of the proposed program. Tables must be provided that clearly describe the projected total year one training and the courses to be delivered under the grant delineated by the primary applicant organization and by the consortium members or subgrantees as applicable. 2 types of tables must be included. Type A, year one total project training that provides a summary across the consortium, and type B, year one projected courses to include a table for the primary applicant organization and each consortium member subgrantee as applicable, with columns for each curriculum, number of courses, number of trainees per course, contact hours per course, and total number of contact hours. The tables must be loaded as a PDF file entitled Tables of Year One Training Program. This is a table, it's a description of the curriculum. This table is loaded into that link that we gave you earlier. So you will be able to see this. If this table formats used below are guides for the requested information. You should describe key curricular courses in outline form. The description of each curriculum must not exceed 2 pages in length and should include the following: the course title, short description of course, training provider, languages, delivery method, course hours, intended audience, learning objectives, and course outline. Do not include copies of the curriculum. This is a copy of the Table 1 training plan. This is an example. It is also included at the link. And this is a table of year one projected courses. This is an example. This is what we'll be looking for. This is also included. And here I'm going to turn it back over to Eric to deal with clinical trials information and evaluation.
Thank you, Kathy. Please be careful to remember that this is a clinical trials not allowed, not accepted application. So be careful that you do not inadvertently submit an application describing an NIH-defined clinical trial when you only intended to propose a training program. You may not submit a clinical trial to a clinical trial not allowed NOFO, and that certain language will get you kicked out before review. So please keep that in mind. It's important. Keep in mind that clinical trial determinations are made on individual applications as these details matter. Generalizations cannot be made. For your help, there is a clinical trial information sheet specific for NIHS applicants proposing activities for WTP, understanding the language and importance of the perspective of training as compared to, for example, researchers. You can refer to this guidance document, and specific questions can be sent to the Director of Division of Human Subjects Research at NIH. And we can post those answers to those questions in an FAQ. So if you want to learn more about those clinical trial aspects, please follow this link and you'll find a more detailed description of language as it relates comparing evaluation and training for WTP specifically. Next slide. And I talked about it a little bit earlier, but we have a minimum criteria document. This provides guidance on how to design and conduct and evaluate training, and has been that way for many years since this program's inception, as most recently revised back in 2018. And evaluation is a required component for all WTP grantees. It's an important component to understand not just that you're doing the training, but that you're doing it in a way that is meaningful and useful. And you could do this, and we understand that different grantees have different ways because you have different occupations and industries, trainers and mindsets to use your own kind of quantitative and qualitative outcome metrics so that we can better understand the safety and culture by using, for example, student quotes and their feedback, and also for an environmental career program, understanding job placement, percentage of employment, and ultimately understanding any economic returns on investment. So next slide. And when you go into the minimum criteria, you can go to 10.10 to look at that program evaluation component on guidance for developing an evaluation plan. We should understand both those process evaluations and outcome evaluations, and understanding the program implementation. The plan should address, for example, those measurements and the evaluation of student learning, progress, and performance, the methods and procedures for evaluating the worker health and safety training, and the process, for example, the instructor feedbacks, the retention of knowledge and hands-on skills by trainees, and any positive outcomes of their training on work practices and the overall worker protection on on-the-job hazards. And once again, going back to that clinical trials document and understanding this document to better prepare your evaluation plan. And next, I believe Kathy might take us away.
Yes, so we are running a little bit ahead of schedule. So we're
Ooh.
gonna take a break now and we're gonna come back around at 2:15. Let's come back at 2:15. I want to remind you that this is the link to the mailbox where you can send questions. You can send questions today. You can also send questions after this briefing, all the way up until you actually submit your application. We will be monitoring this mailbox and we will use all questions that come in. We'll be posting them in the FAQ. So go ahead and take your break and we'll be back at 2:15. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, now we're back. We're back for the Q&A portion here. We have a couple of questions that have already come into the Q&A box, and so I can go ahead and answer those. The first question is the progress report compliance with terms and prior awards included in the 12-page limit for each program component? The answer to that is yes. You should be able to use those 12 pages to put all that information in there for each one of the program's components. So for the ECWT, if you had a prior grant, you would, in that 12-page limit, put in your compliance with the terms and conditions of the award for each one of those. The second question is ongoing program initiatives listed in the section under HWWT specific goals and objectives. Does that mean that the topics listed, climate change, current and emerging preparedness, response and recovery efforts, and substance use and worker health, should that only be included in the hazardous waste worker training program component? No, program initiatives apply for all of the program components. And so you should be able to pick what is important to that particular program component and what you want to do to include in each one of those. And so it should be program initiatives, ongoing program initiatives can fit to each of those program components. I think those are the only two questions that I see. Is there another one that came up? Hold on. The NOFO states for individuals who will not be key or senior personnel, document the facility members' relevant experience and training and appropriate adult education for worker health and safety. Yes, you should include a short description in that narrative about the instructors and their expertise. And you should also include a bio sketch of those individuals. If you think they are key and their expertise is there, you should include a bio sketch of that individual and include it as an attachment. Any other questions from the group? I don't know if I see any hands up. No hands up? None in the mailbox? This is your opportunity. We'll give it a couple of more minutes, and if we don't have any other questions, we'll move forward, but this is an opportunity to ask any questions regarding our programs. If I miss a hand up, someone please let me know.
So we do have a question in the mailbox. Does the project have to cross multiple states to apply for the optional components? For example, our HWWT and our HDPTP components cross. Could the ECWTP Primary Training Center be in one state and supportive training could be conducted in another?
You have to have multi-states involved in each of those program components. Because we are a national or regional training program, you have to have at least 2 states where you're doing training in each of those program components. That is absolutely required under this program.
Another question, when the proposal is it reviewed as a complete package, including all components, or will the components be reviewed separately?
All right. And I'm going to probably refer to Leroy Worth on the specifics of that, but the overall application will be scored, but each of the program components will have their separate review, and reviewers will be assigned those program components to give a critique of that. But Leroy can provide additional information during the Q&A under the SOO proportion, unless Leroy is already there and he wants to answer, but I think that's the answer to that particular question.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, yes, you were correct. In terms of the multi-components, those components will be evaluated. If it goes to full review, they will be evaluated and scored. You'll have a priority score associated with each component, and then the overall impact score, which is when we revisit the application, because there are certain criteria associated with each component, and then the overall. So they will be scored if it goes to full review.
Okay. James, you might want to answer this other question. Do the key personnel forms have to be electronically signed? I'm thinking that might be, maybe he's talking about other support.
If you're talking about other support during the application process, no. If the application is selected for funding, we will reach out for just-in-time information asking for revised other support, and that document has to be electronically signed.
Right. Kirk, if that answered your question, please let us know. Yes, okay, great. Two more minutes and then we'll move on to the next part of the presentation unless we don't receive any other questions. Okay, the question says, do we need other support documents in the proposal? As we have determined, each of the different areas you can support attachments based on what is needed. And so you can put those in there. And like if we're talking about other support, those will be determined later on in just in time, as James has suggested. He said, does other support have to be included in the application, or is it just in time? Just in time only. In reference to the, I'm assuming other support documents, you're talking about other support that an individual receives as far as funding and those type of things. David, if you mean other type of supporting documents, could you please clarify? All right, I don't see any other questions. So I guess we'll move on to the next portion, but we need to clarify one thing before we do move on. In reference to the questions on human subjects and clinical trials, please actually send those questions to the WETP at niehs.nih.gov. box, and we will correlate those answers and provide a response. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go over a few tips, guidelines, and for a successful application. So number one, please make it easy for reviewers and follow the instructions of the RFA or NOFO. The application should be well organized, clearly written, and complete in all details. So please follow closely on the guidelines. The applicant should submit only one application per organization or institution, which contains separate budget pages and a training plan for the 5-year period. If applying for more than one program component under this RFA, the separate budget pages and a separate training plan must be submitted for each program component in one application. It is required that each application have the HWT component. That is a required component. It is optional for applications to have the ECWTP and HDPTP components. It is very important to include strong organizational charts for the program as well as the consortia interrelations. There are page limitations, and these instructions are in the NOFO. Follow the plan of the table of contents. Each topic in the table of contents should be addressed. Page limits are 12 for the overall program and 12 for each program component. This means that if you are applying for more than one program under this RFA, each training plan must keep within the 12-page limit. You must use these component type names when assembling the application and assist. Those are HWWT, ECWTP, and HDPTP. You need to identify, describe, and document your access to the target populations to be trained. As you'll see here, we need the size, worker profiles, the types of hazardous materials, trades and job categories to be trained, geographic locations of the workers, degree of health and safety training they've already received, and for ECWTP, the underserved and disadvantaged individuals. Use existing curricula. Do not include copies of the curriculum as attachments. Outline each curriculum not to exceed 2 pages in length, and you should be included as an attachment. These are the very important dates that you need to be aware of for the RFA ES 24001, which is the U45. The letter of intent receipt date is June 8th of 2024. The application receipt date is July 8th of 2024. All FAQs and materials from this meeting will be posted to that current opportunity funding page on WTP. When preparing your application, you need to use Assist. We will be posting these slides, so you'll be able to link this. There are step-by-step instructions. There are FAQs. There is online help. And there is a video there that we suggest that you watch. We were going to show it today, but it's about 10.5 minutes long. So we figured you guys could look at that on your own. You will get a copy of these slides so you can see the link. These are also other resources you should be aware of: our worker training program homepage, the current funding opportunities, and our National Clearinghouse for worker safety and health training. There's additional NIH information on how to apply, how to use Assist, and applying electronically for training. Important things to remember: read the NOFO carefully and talk to NIH staff if you have any questions. Use the WTB website. Use the web version of the NOFO and the Assist instructions. Go with the NOFO first if they differ. Send questions to the WTP mailbox. Like I said, we will be monitoring that from now until when applications are due. And there will be frequently at the FAQs page will be there as soon as we can get it up. Make the reviewer's job easy. Please be clear, be complete and concise, be organized, and be on time. Remember that once that 5 p.m. local time on July 8th hits, we will no longer be able to accept applications. So we suggest that you try to get them in before the deadline. And best of luck. And now I'm going to turn it over to James Williams.
James is coming up. We had a couple of other questions. We'll try to respond to those electronically, and if not, we'll do that in the next open Q&A. Thanks.
Would you like to do it now?
Nah.
Okay, good afternoon. I'm James Williams. I'm a lead grants management officer within DERT here at NIEHS, and I'm going to just go over a few basic things. Most of the things that I'm going to cover have already been mentioned in the presentation so far. And I can just give you one of the best pieces of advice is what Kathy just said is please read the NOFO, read it carefully. Worker education staff went through a lot of work to make sure all the details are clearly spelled out in this NOFO. Most of the answers are there. And if you get confused on something or can't find exactly what you're looking for, we're always available to help you with that. So a few things that we'll talk about, definitions, just for those that may not have applied for an NIH grant in the past. When we say grantee or recipient, then it is an entity that receives federal money to carry out research or work on behalf of the federal government. You've heard us talk a lot about consortia. Those are non-federal entities that receive a subaward from a pass-through entity. So if you as the grantee receive money and then have a subaward, then that is considered a consortia. You may hear us refer to that as a subawardee, a consortia partner, a sub-grantee, or a sub-recipient, but that is a consortia entity. And that is a separate entity, a non-federal entity that will help carry out work on behalf and will report to you as the recipient organization. Consultant is an individual who provides professional advice or services for a fee, normally not an employee, but someone who comes in with very specific skills for a short period of time to offer consulting or suggestion work, but it's not an employee of the organization. In unusual circumstances, an individual can be a consultant and an employee of that party, but we don't see that very often. And then to prevent apparent or actual conflicts of interest, recipients and consultants must establish written guidelines indicating the conditions of payment of the consulting fees. Signing official is an authorized organizational representative at your entity who can sign and submit documentation on your behalf. That individual is authorized to act and obligate money on behalf of the recipient. The principal investigator is an individual designated by the applicant organization to direct the project and program supported by the award. And note that the principal investigator and the signing official should not be the same individual. Signing official does things such as submits documents, applications, JIT material, and prior approval requests. They provide written concurrence on any information submitted on behalf of the PI. They communicate directly with the grants management specialist. That's who I would be dealing with when these applications go through the review process, and any that are selected for funding, I'll be dealing with the signing official. And if I'm communicating with anyone, if it's a PI, then I will always say, please make sure your signing official is included in any correspondence that we're having. Principal investigator directs the project. They prepare all required reports. They work with the signing official on all policy or financial questions, and they communicate directly with the program officer or the scientific people within NIEHS. Grants management specialist, that's me, and there's about 10 of us here at NIEHS that work on these various programs. We are the NIH contact for financial and policy questions. We issue the awards. We commit funds on behalf of the government. We're responsible for issuing the notice of award and executing any prior approvals for that award. And we again communicate directly with the signing official. Program officer is the contact for the scientific program questions. They prepare all required reports and they communicate directly with the principal investigator. Budget preparation. Kathy just went over some things about assist. The video that she mentioned, the link that's in the slides, is a great tutorial to watch. It's 10 minutes of your time that can answer a lot of questions before you start building your budget in Assist. Within the Assist program, you'll build your budget and it will create the SF424, which is the federal forms that we look at, and that's how it imports into our system. When you build it in Assist, you'll be doing a detailed categorical budget for these awards. You'll submit a budget for each component and for each subaward or consortia project that you have. Couple of notes down here to mention. One is escalation. For you that are familiar with submitting budgets, you know that you are allowed to submit within your budget escalation as it is authorized by your organization. However, please note, NIH will review that. We will put it in the file that you have submitted for escalation. But for the last several years, NIH does not currently provide escalation in the out years. So if you build your budget and you've included a 3% escalation, 5% escalation in the out years, we will remove that. And so therefore your budget will be reduced in the out years. Some agencies are required to submit that escalation as part of your budget. Some do not, but just be aware there again that NIH does not currently provide escalation. So that will be removed in the out years. If you do include that, it must be justified. It must be in accordance with your organizational policies. And it needs to be clearly stated in the budget justification that that's included in your costs that you've submitted. The other thing to mention is in budget, you will be required to travel to various meetings as part of the U45 program for awardees that are selected. Within that budget, the principal investigator and the business official will be required to attend the meetings. So please ensure that you build in travel funds for that within your budget categories. Budget preparation, subawards. Follow the same guidelines that you do for your organization. So the budget forms are required and should follow the same procedures. The direct cost should include the parent subtotal direct cost, which may be subject to budget caps. F&A on the consortia is included in the total direct cost of the parent award. Budget justification must be there as well. For any costs that are itemized, you must include that in your budget justification information. Honoraria is not allowed in these detailed budgets. Incentives and stipends for participants are allowed and should be listed under Section F for other costs. And I'll show you a screen grab of that in just a minute. Here's what your assist will start looking like as you build your budget. So the top part is for senior and key personnel. The second circle is for other personnel. So that for people that you deem within your organization and on this project to be key personnel, they go in the first section. Any other personnel go in the second section. Equipment would be your next line item. Travel, which I've just mentioned, you'll have a lot of travel costs, but part of that has to be to attend required meetings as part of the program. The next section is mainly for training, and I realize this program does a lot of training, but this is not a section that's applicable to what you'll be supporting. Your cost for training and travel will be reported in other costs. So we mark through this so you'll understand that that's not this. This is more for training programs like a T32 or a fellowship type training, but not a U45 program. These are things that we just mentioned as we were going through here, what the fields look like, where you put your senior and key personnel, your other personnel, equipment and travel. Other costs. This is where any stipends would go, any trainee travel would go, any trainee related costs would go. You'll total that up to get your direct costs. We're going to talk about indirect costs, I think, on the next slide, keeping in mind that these awards, I'll have another slide for that in a minute. Your other costs will include things such as supplies, consultant fees, computer service fees, consortia subaward fees, facility rental, if there are any approved alterations or renovations. Facilities and administrative costs for this program, as spelled out in the NOFO, The F&A is capped at 8% modified total direct costs. You can receive F&A at 8% on the first 25,000 of any subaward or consortia sites. You will exclude equipment or any tuition or training related fees. The 8% cap is also applied to any subrecipients or consortia sites. And F&A must be provided to all consortia sites or subrecipients in accordance with the 8% cap. Here's what your cumulative budget, as it all rolls up after your 5 years of detailed budget that you submit, will roll up into a cumulative total based on those categories. And this is what that screen looks like. Just-in-time information, as I mentioned a minute ago, if your application is reviewed and receives a good score and is selected for funding, then myself or someone within the grants management branch would reach out at that point asking for just-in-time information. Part of that includes other support. And when we ask for your other support, as one of the questions that came in a minute ago, that will be submitted on each person who's considered key personnel on the project. That person needs to electronically, digitally sign that other support document as part of the JIT process. And please keep in mind, as you're listing your projects that you have support on, 0, NA, not applicable, cannot be listed on a project. If you do submit that, we will send it back and ask for a revised version. We'll ask for any human subjects research. If you have that within your application, we would need your IRB approvals, human subjects education certificates, other things such as that. Here's a slide that just talks about what is human subjects research. And it's when an institution employees or agency or agents intervene or interact with human subjects for research purposes. If the institution's employees or agents obtain individually identifiable private information about human subjects, and the institution receives a direct HHS award to conduct human subjects research. Here's a chart that talks about human subjects exemptions. I'm not going to go through each of these, but you'll have that as part of your slide packet. And here's a list of resources. There again, it just reiterates some of the things that Kathy's mentioned as far as how to apply through the ASSIST program, some frequently asked questions that you have, how to apply for a multi-component program. These are considered multi-component with the cores that are available, and a link about human subjects and if you are doing human subjects research. And that concludes my section.
Thank you, James. Now we will have Leroy Worth from our scientific review branch. He will be presenting.
Yes, we can advance the slides. Hi, good afternoon. I'm Leroy Worth. I'm the scientific review officers and within the scientific review branch in DERT. A lot that has been covered, actually a lot has been covered, and I will repeat certain items because of the specificity, and we want to draw attention to important aspects as you formulate your applications and submit them. Usually, we always tell folks, just like if I was doing a review and we deal with a review panel, questions don't usually happen prior to the folks getting in and actually executing what we are trying to direct you in terms of these NOFOs. So I would assume there will be more questions when you start to put these applications together. So if I could have the next slide, I'll just go over what we want to think about relative to the review aspects. The first thing, and it's been covered by Kathy earlier, but the letters of intent, they're very crucial. They aren't binding, but if you basically want us to get a feel for what it is you're proposing in terms of training, please provide that information in that letter because it gives us a kind of a head start to think about potential reviewers. The more time we have to recruit, the better chances we can find commensurate folks to review your particular application. You will email those to the address presented, worth@niehs.nih.gov. And what we require, or you can't really require it, but what we suggest that you provide is include your name, address, telephone numbers in case we have to contact you, email address, and give a kind of a brief discussion of what it is you intend to do with that training within the U45 multi-component application. Provide any key personnel, and as alluded to earlier by Sharon, you want to make sure that you don't provide kind of erroneous personnel. Just give us the key personnel that you are going to have specific roles within your application. A lot of times we try to tell applicants, don't put everybody on there because that could be a potential reviewer that understands your type initiative. And if you put them in there and it's like a letter of support and it doesn't feel like they're really integrated, that's one person, and whoever that participating person is, that organization, all that becomes in conflict. So spend time in terms of identifying that key personnel. And if it's not kind of a crucial role and it doesn't seem a part of your application, it's kind of an add-on, it could be detrimental to your submission. Next slide. In terms of pointers, again, you want to make sure you start early, and you have to register what we call the e-commons. It's ERA. It's the registering for you as your institution. Make sure you get that done early on. We call it ERA Commons, but it's basically e-commons. You want to make sure you do that, and make sure when you go to grants.gov, all that information provided. Everyone that's associated in that key personnel has an e-commons account. It makes it easier for us because as science becomes more collaborative, what ends up happening is that if all that information is not up to date in terms of key personnel, people change institutions now every other year or something like that. That information is not updated. Guess what happens? We run into conflicts because your e-commons accounts are outdated. Make sure when you submit that anyone, key personnel associated with the application, that e-commons accounts are all updated because it can cause havoc. And you don't want to have that when we're trying to put that panel together. As alluded to earlier, the receipt date's 5 p.m. your local time, Monday, July 8th, 2024. Again, these are through the ASSIST program, and want to make sure that if you don't know what ASSIST is, it's just basically the application submission system and an integration of your submission tracking. So that's what ASSIST stands for, and that's what you will use in terms of navigating, even when you're putting your application together, when it gets submitted, that ASSIST and grants.gov, any SRO can get access to applications when they come in. A lot of times we work closely with program and folks, and we can basically tell when applications are submitted, they're incomplete or something like that. This is why we tell everyone to submit early. If you don't submit early, you can run in a case where you come up against that deadline, and as Kathy alludes, there's nothing we can do to make sure they accept your application. So make sure you prepare early. Next slide. Here's one key aspect people take advantage of, more experienced applicants take advantage of, is a cover letter. This is very crucial in terms of how we think about potential conflicts. If you think you have a difference of opinion or something like that, you can justify why we do not use a certain individual. You can provide that in the cover letter. You could talk about areas of expertise that you think will be needed. We pretty much go through these applications exhaustively to find appropriate expertise, but you are basically allowed to kind of direct us in what you think is really crucial. In terms of extenuating circumstances, I'll go over this in a second. There are situations where information can be provided in the cover letter, and I'll talk about that in a second. But for the most part, this cover letter just kind of draws attention to anything that might have changed or needs corrections in terms of, because these are all electronic, and sometimes the applications are allowed in, but we have to do additional information relative to your application. So that when it goes to the committee, everything they need is provided there, and it's provided in a certain spot. We have instances where information wasn't provided, so it give you a window. Even though the receipt date, you have to get this information to us by this time in the proper format as a PDF, and it has to go through your Office of Sponsored Programs, and we can get that information associated with the application. Now, with these other extenuating situations, and we don't usually advertise this, but I always do because I want everybody to have a chance. And if you have extenuating circumstances, or as they are, certain situations where an application could be late, didn't make the deadline, but you provided cover letter saying why it was not received by that receipt date. And that submit late, it takes you to situations that will be considered. We do not tell you we'll allow you to submit a late application up front, but I have not seen, especially for NOFOs or funding opportunity announcements, I have not seen a situation where if you stayed in the regulations, so just submitting within 14 days based on if you were, say, a reviewer, 2 months on either side of that receipt date on July 8th. So 2 months would be May 8th, and 2 months on the other end would be, let's see, July, August, September 8th. If you were serving on a standing committee, a certain committee for NIH, you could qualify for late submission within the 14 days. So if you think that might be happening, we can't promise you anything, but I have never seen where they didn't do it. If you provided in your cover letter information saying that you did serve on a committee, but make sure you check that link. This stuff, anything that comes in late goes to what we call DRR. That's Division Receipt Referral. They will look at it, but ultimately it comes down to the RIO, that's the Reviewer Integrity Officer. But usually it comes to division, to the SRB branch chief. And depending on the SRO, we can verify that this person, we can see that they served on this committee, and we'll allow you to come in. So those are instances where you could do that. So please look at the submission for late submissions. Also included that is what we call PSMs, that's post-submission material. If you got any late breaking or anything that qualifies, you're allowed up to submit that up to 30 days before the review date. And when the review is actually assigned, we tell you to check with your e-folder. You can go in, you're using your e-commerce account. Once that review date set, you count 30 days back, and you can provide any kind of post-submission material based on what's provided in that a Google site. Okay, next slide. But make sure you check to submit late. We kind of gone over this already in terms of e-commerce account. Make sure you start early. We can't overemphasize. Tell folks to start very, very early, because we see situations where they can't get information in, and they want us to help them, and there's nothing we can do, especially after the receipt date. I've seen more and more of this lately, so we ask that you do it 2 weeks out. Try to get information in the system and check for errors. You don't want to get up on that last day and have errors associated with your submission, because it could be trouble. Next slide. This is just the first level review, which we call a special emphasis panel. I'll go through that, but this is just a schematic illustrating how the flow works in terms of once you submitted your application. We get the letters of intent. We kind of know what that, I'll talk to program about, okay, this is what we up against. This is about the size of committee we would need. We get the applications in. They go through an admin review. That's where we deal with responsiveness. If there's something that's it passed grants.gov, but it's not responsive, the application is going to be returned to you. In the past, we used a right of justification, but now we just basically say your application is going to be returned. If it's responsive, it goes to the review committee. The review will happen somewhere in November 2024 of this year. And the way that process, when I mentioned earlier, based on the kind of Q&A that happened, we have what we call discuss applications of what we call deemed go to full review. And you get summary statements, and that's where you get discussion of each of the components that are associated with that U45. Not discuss application will only get the individual critiques based on it didn't rise to the more meritorious applications. In some instances, we don't ever have not discuss applications. Other instances, we try to do the top half, but depending on the response rate, I work with program officers to decide if we can discuss them all. We like to do that. We get a full range. We don't kick anything out, but if there's a high response based on count, we don't mention the F word, but if we know about the number of awards, we try to get 2 to 3 times over the number of awards that will be projected out. Everyone will get a summary statement if it is considered responsive. Everything goes to the council, and I'll mention that in the next few slides. And then awards around April, I think it's probably June 2025, not necessarily April. Next slide. I keep pushing the button here. Again, unlike CSR, which is Center for Scientific Review, this is IC specific, which is associated with mostly NOFOs or RFAs. There will be a special emphasis panel. Unlike standing study sections, applications have to hit the study sections. Special emphasis panels have to hit the applicants in the applications. So this is a tailored review based on the type of applications and what's being proposed that comes in. And that's the way, which is a little different than you might see at CSR, where the applications actually have to hit the panels. What we look for is, again, to get all the expertise. We kind of consult back and forth with the program, in terms of making sure we have all particular areas of expertise, experience needed to properly judge the merits of your application. We go through extensive confidentiality and potential conflicts and back and forth to make sure that we don't have any issues that could cause maybe a re-review or issues in terms of merits of the applications that were submitted. Again, this is ES 24-001. Please look, and I think James alluded to this, Kathy, Sharon, Eric, everybody alludes to, pay attention to that NOFO. If you have questions later, make sure you check with either me or program. We don't want to have an issue where something is lacking in terms of your application. And I'll go through that in the next slide. In terms of a application, this is just real quickly and won't spend too much time on it, but there's a scoring system. It goes from 1 being the best and 9 being the worst. You get a score between 10 to 90. And if I can have the next slide. This is kind of how we instruct the SEPs in terms of how reviewers should score a particular component. Usually in the exceptional range, there's essentially no weaknesses. Outstanding, which is a 20, they're negligible weakness, and just watch this as you go down. But when you get down to 30, 40 range or something like that, you start to create a number of weaknesses. And once you get to the good range, you really have 1 moderate or 2 moderate weaknesses or something like that. And it just breaks down this way. Usually if it goes to full review, you're usually in that 1 to 4 range or something like that. Potentially, we don't usually go up to the 5 range, but what usually happens if we say we're going to do the more meritorious application, we start to 1 to 4. Once we have that range, it kind of recalibrates once we come to meeting, because we want to make sure that all the applications are not necessarily amalgamating around that range. And so we tell them, now we're going to try to recalibrate and go and do the full range again. So applications that could have been in the 40 range might end up in the 50s, or it could go up towards maybe a 25 or 30. But that's where we do the calibration in terms of the committee gets an identity, and we can make sure that your applications are being judged on merit based on what's provided in that RFA. Next slide. This, in terms of the FOA or NOFO, and the review criteria is the typical NIH 5 criteria associated with significance, media, innovation, approach, and environment. I just want to basically note that these criteria are starting to be removed. We're going to probably go down to 3 criteria, and eventually it will infiltrate all the mechanisms associated with NIH that are using this 5 criteria. But since for this NOFO, this is still on deck in terms of how we review the application. Kathy's gone through all this relative to the components, the training components. Just make sure that whatever you provide, you make sure you look at the criteria associated with that training aspect. And we've gone over human subjects quite effectively. Make sure if anything associated with biohazards, won't expect any with animal care, that's also covered. Next slide. I won't go over this because this is provided in the NOFO. This just highlights things that you want to make sure you ascribe to when you're writing your applications. Look at this information, make sure you properly address the significance as provided here in terms of aims of the components. Are you providing a gap in the field in terms of training? How much novelty is associated with what you're doing? You want to make sure you emphasize these because each one of these get kind of an individual score. Most of the times it comes down to the approach, but significance and innovation can weigh in pretty heavily. So make sure you do due diligence in terms of making sure. I always tell people, don't write your applications based on, I'll answer bullet 1, bullet 2, bullet. You want to make sure that concept that you're pushing is integrated across the different components, across the ideology, and the types of expertise that you're saying will be associated with the key personnel. Next slide. And this is investigators. Again, this is key personnel. You want to make sure you have appropriate expertise. As Sharon has alluded to, when that key personnel, those bio sketches, make sure those bio sketches are up to date and they use the NIH format. Try to make sure that, because reviewers get really upset when they don't use this standard format for bio sketches. So make sure you do that, and make sure whoever's associated with a key personnel, that they have a proper role, identifiable role within the application. Next slide. Innovation. With this, again, it gets to novelty in terms of what you're doing. Make sure you can kind of infuse enthusiasm among the reviewers of something that's new or different. I think that's always crucial. It doesn't necessarily be the overall driver of a particular overall impact score, but it could basically hurt if they don't see any novelty in what you're doing. So make sure you do due diligence here too. Next slide. Approach is usually me. I'm an organic chemist, so I always kind of stick to this one as kind of a major driver of the final score. But make sure you again look at the approach and how you're executing what it is in terms of training. All those points that are provided in that NOFO, make sure you properly address those. And again, with the training, make sure you have that for the environmental component and the hazmat disaster. Next slide. Environment, that's one of the things that's probably going to end up going away. This usually doesn't affect the application, but make sure you do due diligence here. And if applicable, like with the environmental component, make sure you do that with your submission. Next slide. And we go over this already, but if you do have human subjects or something related to your application, make sure we do not allow CTs for this. So you don't want to have any intervention type strategy or something like that where you have a control group or not, or giving the implications. Sometimes they don't use chat GPT, but they look for keywords in that document. And sometimes we'll tell you that it's not a clinical trial, but if they see those words within the writing, you could jeopardize your application being turned back. So make sure you do due diligence. And like Sharon alluded to, if you have questions, make sure you check with them, and they can, if you have an idea, pass it by them first before you start with your submission. And for those renewals, which we will have those, I think there was a question I thought I had seen in the chat earlier, but the renewals are associated with the same page limitations. What you want to do is to focus on, you have all aspects with the overall and within the individual components to talk about your what you had advanced in your previous submission. You don't have to say you accomplished all the goals that you had intended. Just focus on those that you did, because all science, everything changes, training changes. So you can emphasize that and say how you modified what you initially proposed, and this is what you intend to do now and why you're doing that way. So make sure for the renewals you do that. Next. Won't spend too much time on this, but I think this has been thoroughly touched on by Kathy. You want to be clear in term and concise in terms of how you write your application. Make sure everything is communicating between the different components. You want to reiterate aspects, because when people are reading it, can miss it. And you want to make sure you are more redundant in terms of what you're providing, in case they missed it or they need to defer back based on seeing it somewhere else. Do not have try to avoid small fonts, that sometimes those will get kicked out, but don't look like you're trying to overstuff relative to those 12 pages. And please try to make sure you have someone else to kind of go over it and look at your drafts. Next slide. And this is kind of self-explanatory, clear, well organized, and you've taken the time to read it multiple times. I always tell people, when you apply, once you get your application complete, try to have it out. We don't have much time for this in terms of how it's out there, but make sure you get a draft very quickly and put it away and come back and read it at least twice. And then usually you have a pretty solid application when it goes in. Some people don't read it once because there are so many disconnects. And if there is a question, your application is probably not going to do well. And again, you want to provide evidence that you can execute what you're proposing. I always tell people, when we look at applications, I always tell them it's like a fork in the road. If you're driving, when reviewers are reading your application, they're coming to a fork. What you want to do is to be able to tell them when they get to that fork, if you're going left or right. If they're getting to the end of your application, which is that fork, and they don't know where you're going, then it's not going to do well. I always tell them, even training, if you properly control for what you're doing, even if it doesn't work, you properly did it in a fashion that we can now take that off the books as a possible path to take. And those are, people will give merit to those versus ones where it's less clear. Next slide. The second level review is the NIEHS Council review. That's National Advisory Environmental Health Sciences. That's where it goes to second level, where program officers have kind of a funding plan. We call it ZOC, a zone of consideration for their particular NOFO. That's where it goes to the second level for consideration. Want to note that unlike CSR and standing receipt dates, NOFOs are not appealable in terms of, once that review happens, that review is pretty much set. You can provide what we call information letters that POs can receive, and that can go to the second level review. Next slide. Again, I'm Leroy Worth, review contact. Dr. Linda Bass will be associated in executing this review. We both have over 20 plus, 25 plus years in doing reviews. We will execute this once we get the applications come in. We'll work closely with grants management and review in terms of organizing the review and making sure that goes as planned, and to get your summary statements out in a reasonable fashion, that you have time to generate an information letter if you feel the need. Okay.
Thank you, Leroy. So we're going into another question and answer session. There have been some questions that have been coming in on the Zoom link, and I believe several people have been answering them. There have also been some questions coming into our WTP mailbox that I'm going to read and let the appropriate person answer. Okay, the first question is, do we submit other support for all people listed as key personnel?
You will at the time, if we get to the point of a funding decision and JIT is requested, then yes, other support will be required for all key personnel.
Thank you. This next one, James, is probably for you. For the component budgets, is there a minimum number of subaward budgets to be part of the component budget? Is there guidance on how to determine if a partner requires a subaward budget?
I thought I answered part of that, at least in the chat, but maybe it didn't go through. So there's, if I'm understanding the question correctly, there's not a minimum or a maximum number of consortia that you can add. Keep in mind that you have to stay within certain budget constraints. It has to make sense financially and in your budget justification. And as far as guidance on where you can go to look that up, I'm not really sure about that. But if you have specific questions as you're developing your budget, you might want to reach out to program or to one of us and just have that discussion.
Thank you, James. And I think you may have answered this on the Q&A session, but it's actually in our mailbox, so they may not have actually gotten the question. So I'm going to read it once again. 2 CFR 200 defines equipment as items costing over $10,000. Will NIH reflect that same definition? F&A increased subaward cover to 50,000 K under 2 CFR 200. Will NIH change its practices to reflect these changes?
Thanks for this question. So I looked them both up as we were going through the last presentation, and I put those in the chat as well. But according to the grants policy statement that's just been updated recently, equipment is still being held at $5,000. And so that's in the chat. And for the F&A, NIH is still using the $25,000 threshold for each consortia site.
Now's your time to send in questions either on the Zoom Q&A or to the WTP mailbox. Okay, we've got one in the Q&A. Sharon indicated the specific aims section is part of the 12-page research strategy section. However, it is a separate section in assist and has always been a standalone piece up to 1 page. The research strategy has always been a 12-page maximum, so would like clarification.
I will look it up, but according to what I saw online is that it will, you have a maximum of 1 page for your specific aims. And that should be a part of that 12, but we will clarify and look up that additional information and we will make sure that we post that if I was incorrect.
Okay, we have another question. Will each individual identified as key personnel have to have an ERA Commons login?
Yes.
Most definitely.
And we posted that in the Q&A. I think I put that answer in there.
The next question, are subawards and/or consultants considered other significant contributors?
I'll answer it from the program perspective. If that that's a person that you put in there, if they have a significant role in your application where if they were not there and they could and were not able to do the work, then if the project could fail or have problems, then they are a significant contributor or key personnel and should absolutely be treated that way.
And if I can tag onto that too, what we normally see for any consortia PI, they are normally considered key personnel.
And for us, when we think about the program components and we have like an environmental career worker training program and we have a site, if you have someone that is the either the PI for that site or the program coordinator or manager for that site, and they're responsible for the day-to-day operations and making sure that the training happens and all of the reporting is done, then they are actually should be indicated as a key personnel.
Are there any other questions? We'll give it a few more minutes.
And just to kind of circle back, on the question about the specific aims, that is the dedicated page, but research strategy is usually when that 12-page limit comes into part, because that technically is separate. But that research strategy, and especially for the research project, something like that, with the significance, that's where you have your 12 pages.
I'll once again reiterate that our mailbox, wetp@niehs.nih.gov, will be open even after this presentation. We'll be monitoring it closely, and any questions that come in will be placed on our FAQ page with the answers.
Kathy, the slides will be shared there too, right? Because like I
Yes,
said,
the
the links.
the slides and this, we have been recording this. They'll all be shared on the current funding opportunity page. I will say it may take a little bit of time to get the actual presentation because we have to get some QA/QC done on it, but the slides will be there shortly.
Okay, thanks.
We're not seeing any other questions. We'll give it another minute. We do have a hand up, Thomas Easterbrook. Can that person speak?
I did not have a question. Sorry. I did
Okay.
that by mistake.
Not a problem. Thanks, Tom. Well, I'm going to move forward and go towards conclusions. We might get out of here early. I only see 3:16 p.m., so we were supposed to go to 4:30. If you think of a question within the next 10 minutes, we will hang around and be here to answer those. But I wanted to thank all of the staff here at NIEHS and all of our branches who support our work here. Thank you for their participation in their presentations. Thank you for the support staff here at NIEHS that handles the meeting support and logistics. We could not do this without you. And to make it available for those who cannot attend, we want to make sure that everyone gets access to this information. Like we had said before, all FAQs that are going to be sent in to us We will make sure that we correlate those and have a response, so everybody will be able to have an answer to those. Now, if there was a specific question that's been asked about a particular applicant and it's specific to their organization, what we will try to do is we'll take it and make it generic and post that question up and a response for that. But we want to make sure that it is transparent, that we will answer all questions and everybody will have those responses available on that webpage. So we'll give it another couple of minutes. And we're not holding anyone if you want to leave, but this concludes our NOFO briefing meeting on the U45 Hazardous Materials Worker Training Program. We hope to have our next NOFO for the Department of Energy Nuclear Worker Training Program out shortly, with the next maybe week or so. And we will be putting out information about the briefing for that one, and it will be virtually only. So thanks again, everyone. We'll hang around for a couple of minutes if you have any questions.
I guarantee you those questions are going to come when they start putting these applications together. Sharon, I think there's a question in the that popped up.
They didn't hear the answer to the question regarding if key personnel need to have an
Yeah.
ERA Commons login and a username. Yes, they do.
Thanks.
Mhm.
And just to kind of tag on what Sharon, again, with conflicts, that's why it's so crucial that all that information has to be in the system and be updated.
I see a hand up for Ted. Would you like to say your question? Oh, it went away.
This is actually Kenny.
Oh, Kenny, go ahead, Kenny.
Dr. Worth, is there any value in organizing the narrative part of our applications around the review criteria such as significance, investigators, innovation, and that?
Yes, relative to that component, because the reviewers, they're going to look at the NOFO. And if you scroll down, it's like you have a part associated with the applicants. Then you have what the reviewers are going to be looking for or directed to use in terms of assessment of your application. So yeah.
So actually organizing it around that structure while still including all of the required elements.
That's
laid
correct.
out.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. I like to tell everyone, do not leave any stone unturned in terms of what I always tell people, if you're an applicant, go to that section and what the reviewer is going to be asked to evaluate.
We have another question in the mailbox. To confirm if staff at a training site is trained in one state and the direct participant training is in another state, it does not meet the requirements of the ECWTP component. Do you need me to repeat that? To confirm, if staff at a training site is trained in one state and the direct participant training is in another state, does it not meet the requirements of the ECWTP component?
I'm not quite sure I follow that, but I'm gonna just kind of give what I'm thinking may be the question. We have a criteria that you have to do training in more than 2 states, at least 2 states. So if you're doing training in one state for a trainee that's in another state, and you're saying, is that 2 states? Actually, we have hands-on training. For example, so if you're going to be doing a HAZWOPER training, you can't do that training all in one state and then have the other person come in online. You really do need to have someone being trained in that state in person to be able to do that training. And so I think that's one of the things that's important. And the way we have our program set up, we're a consortia-based program. So if you are a program where you're only going to be doing training in, let's say, Virginia, and that's all you're going to be doing training in, then that is not going to be appropriate for this particular funding opportunity announcement. You really need to make sure you're doing 2 states and doing training there. And if you're doing training and it's all going to be virtual, I have to think about that, because I have not had that question come up to us, because we do have some trainings that can be done, completely virtual, but not all that can, based on the hands-on component. But we still really focus on, you really need to have training in at least 2 states to be responsive under this particular NOFO. And if you could clarify, if I answered that question correctly for you, let me know. If not, if you can maybe give us more context to the question, and we'll make sure that we respond. All right, folks, we have stayed on for an extra couple of minutes. We don't see any additional questions available. Last call. Q&A, hold on.
If we consider instructors as key personnel, do they also need an ERA Commons username?
The answer to that, if you consider them as key personnel, then yes, they
Yeah.
need to, because that's the criteria for having an account and have a username. Yes.
Yep, that identifies the institution they're associated with through their DUNS. That's why it's so crucial, because we get situations where folks move and their accounts are not updated or outdated, and it causes an issue when we go to do the review. So make sure you have updated information, and they have to have an e-commons account, because that's how we get linked in terms of identifying. The system identifies conflicts because of that DUNS number associated with the e-commons account. Thanks.
Okay. Another question, is this for the lead organization only or sub-grantees?
If they're considered key personnel, whether they're for the lead organization or for the sub, then they do need to have that user account. You have to really look at the definition of what a key personnel is.
Next question, does the key personnel ERA Commons login info apply to subawardee as well?
David, did you go to anonymous attendee and ask that question again? Feels like I'm going in circles on this one. Yes, it all depends on that definition. And you have to look at it and you have to determine based on your application and what that person is doing. And are they having a significant role in the project? That if something happened and that person left and that project could not be successful or could not be done, then that is a person that's really considered key personnel and they should have that.
Okay, from the mailbox, I have a clarification from the earlier question. We are planning to train trainers in one state to conduct participant training. Participants would be trained solely in another state.
Repeat that again.
So let me go back to the original question. To confirm if staff at a training site is trained in one state and the direct participant training is in another state, it does not meet the requirements of the ECWTP component. The clarification is we were planning to train trainers in one state to conduct participant training. Participants would be trained solely in another state.
Okay, I think I might understand. So you're having a program and you're doing a train the trainer that you might do it in, let's say, Ohio. And then those individuals are going to then go back to their home state, whether it be Virginia, and they're going to actually do the training. Then that particular model will work. However, we want to make sure that training is going on in two states. So you're saying that the trainer component is going to be in one and the actual training of the ECWT is in another. So we're going to have to really think about that because I have not heard that particular way of organizing the training under the ECWT. We were really looking at least training done in two states. And in essence, that is. So we got to think about that in reference to how we're going to respond to that. So I'll have to think about that and get back to everybody.
Sharon.
Yes, go ahead, Kenny.
This, you may not be able to answer, Dr. Worth may be able to, I'm not sure, but will a sub-awardee that's in a different, employed by a different institution, but is a key personnel on our grant, will their institution have to create an ERA Commons presence and that key personnel register through that, or can they register through ours but indicate their place of employment, so to speak?
They need to do it at that placement because we have to look at that in terms of potential conflicts. It could throw things off. So they would do it at their host institution or wherever they're located. Because again, the kind of what people don't realize when you submit applications, and it's become more of an issue now as applications become more collaborative in nature, that we have to know what institutions to take off the table. Depending on if award is made, a person could be at that same institution and would not know it, and or might know it because they know that person on that subaward in this case is at that same institution. They could it would not be tractable if they didn't do it at that institution, because then that person will have to declare as a conflict if it was a
So
reviewer.
they will have to have their own, their institution will have to have an
Yes.
ERA Commons
Yeah.
presence.
That's the whole purpose of the that key commons is to track that individual to an IC, an institution.
Thank you.
Yeah, because that it's come to a new level. I've never seen anything like what's happening now, because people are moving more, well, there was a time when people go to the institution, they'd probably be there for most of their careers. Now they could jump 3 or 4 times in 5 years, and their commons account will be from 3 years ago. And then we get in there, we get assignments done, and then a reviewer comes in and say, wait a minute, this person's at my institution. They aren't what was in the application. That's when we have problems. And it does happen more often now than we've ever seen. So I always tell people, when you submit, if you got anybody with that key personnel from any institution, make sure they say that their information is up to date, because a lot of times people don't go back and do that. And if they aren't submitting that often, they usually don't get updated. So you, as like a host institution, would think that, okay, they got an e-commerce account, but it's outdated. That's a problem. And we could get great expertise to understand what it is you're submitting, because every time we tell people with SEPs, the committee has to hit these applications. So we're doing algorithms to find matches for your application based on what you're proposing. Then we get 2 weeks, 3 weeks out from the meeting, and then recognize that key reviewers on that your application are now in conflict because the e-commerce count was incorrect or not up to date.
All right, we see no more questions. You can at any time send a response back to an email to us at wetp@niehs.nih.gov, and we will respond, and then also post those questions and answers on our current funding opportunities page. So this concludes our NOFO briefing. Thanks again for everyone, and have a good day. Bye-bye.